So we're back here in the Sinai, Mitla Pass. This is our Mitla Pass scenario. We're about to start turn 5. We have a little bit to go over. Ambush at Mitla Pass. So through the first 4 turns, the Israelis lost their AMX-13 tank. Well, it's probably all blurry. Let me talk about the big picture first. The scenario uses 2 maps joined short end to short end. So you have a long, narrow playing area. You can see it there in the scenario description layout. The 2 long maps there. Basically, the Israelis they start out with 3 separate forces. They start with a half-track mounted infantry force that's over here. They start with a small force here. That's the AMX-13 tank, a commander, and elite infantry here in the center of the battle area. And then they start with a rear. I can't remember if they call it the rear element combat patrol back here, which is a if I can get it on the screen, yeah, kind of. Back here, there's a mortar, some elite infantry, another commander. So the Israelis definitely start with 3 distinct forces separated across this long playing area. The Egyptians have a primarily light infantry force, reinforced with a 6-pounder AT gun, an engineer platoon, a medium machine gun platoon, and a light truck. And basically they set up, I had them set up right at this choke point, which is also put the AMX-13 and commander and elite infantry basically in the kill zone there. But now, after 4 turns, the Israelis are basically flanking from the south, flanking the Egyptian position. It's probably only a matter of time before the Israelis wipe out this southern Egyptian force. So at this point, the Israelis have lost their AMX-13 tank, and they've lost one half track. So, and the Egyptians have lost 2 of their infantry, 2 of their light infantry units. So now I'm thinking that maybe the Egyptians, well, let me review the rule first. So setup for the Egyptians, all forces are to be set up in any hex on either map that is of level 3 elevation or higher. Okay, so they could have. So I put, one force on the north side of this choke point and 1 force on the south side of the choke point. Maybe the Egyptians should put 1 more security force up here next to this gorge to basically protect that southern flank, way up here on the highest elevation. That's a possibility now. Rules-wise, no, I forgot one thing I was saying, but there were 2 things I was to say. I can't remember one right now, but one of those 2 things is I do think that I might have missed something, and it is something to remember. So in this game, in Sands of War, by and large, the combat system is, 1 unit. 1 unit attacks 1 unit. 1 unit attacks 1 target. By and large, or actually I'm sorry, not by and large. There is no combining of any combat factors in this game at all. Not in direct fire, indirect fire, or melee. None of that. It's each unit firing at each target unit, which does give it very much a miniatures-like feel, but I like that. But because it's one unit to one unit, it's easy to forget one thing, and that is that the stacking rules mean that you should still consider a target stack, because there are 3 elite infantry stacked here, 3 Israeli elite infantry stacked here. So when that stack of 3 is fired on, there's going to be a modifier for stacking. So let's talk about the basic stacking. They don't call it general. They don't call it basic rules. They call them general rules. So I should use the same terminology. So in the general rules under stacking, it's basically 2 and 2. A player may not have more than 2 vehicle units and or 2 non-vehicle units in the same hex at the end of a turn. That's per side as usual in our war games. Headquarters, forward observer units, wrecks, and non-vehicles riding within vehicles do not count towards the stacking limit. That's interesting. I had forgotten that headquarters do not count towards stacking, which is interesting. I'm not sure what they... Well, it doesn't matter. That's the general rule for stacking. I really like the optional rule, and I like to always play with this optional rule. So the optional rule is a little different. The optional rule is called overstacking. If more than 2 friendly vehicle and or non-vehicle units occupy a hex at any time during a turn, the units are considered to be overstacked. Overstacked units suffer a defense factor reduction of -1 per unit in the hex beyond the normal limit to a minimum defense factor of 1. So basically, that I interpret that to mean that these 3 elite infantry, in this hex, if the Egyptians fire on this hex, each of these elite infantry start off with not 5 defense factor, but 4, because they are 1 overstacked. So you could have 5 infantry platoons in this hex, but you're overstacked by 3, and each of those units would have 3 less defense factor. So each of them would have 2. Goes without saying, I really like that rule, but I also do think I forgot it. So, and to my mind, that's kind of, I don't know, that's different than 1 unit firing on 1 target unit. So I do need to remember that. And otherwise, it's just a really fun game. So it's been a few days since I've played this Sands of War and this scenario, and very good sign that I've just been thinking a lot about it. This game just has a really good feel. Now, I will caveat my statement that it has a good feel because, you know, Sands of War was one of a handful of games that I taught myself as I was getting into war games. So it has a, it has that special meaning to me, I guess. And I completely understand experienced wargamers' frustration and dismissal of the game for all sorts of perfectly valid reasons. Now, I will say one thing, and I was thinking about this the other day, and I'll just review this, make sure I'm right. These are 250 meter hexes. These are 250 meter hexes. It's a lot of terrain, and also I'll also review. I already reviewed it, but I'm gonna point it out again because well, I guess to remind everybody, under the visibility and spotting rules, it has a section friendly units. So a hex containing a unit friendly to the attacker blocks line of fire if the attacker, target, and friendly unit are all on the same elevation. So this is what I was thinking before. I was thinking okay, so if a tank, so if the AMX-13 is here, for example, and there's an Israeli infantry platoon, non-vehicle or leg infantry platoon here, and there's a Egyptian light infantry platoon here. First I was thinking, okay, it makes perfect sense that the infantry would be firing right through this 250-meter hex that contains just 4 tanks. I mean, it's perfectly reasonable that they would be firing through the hex at the Egyptians, considering all this space. And then I'm thinking, well, actually, it doesn't even matter if it's a tank. It isn't any different. Considering the size, there isn't any difference. Basically, this platoon, looking through this hex at a potential, enemy target hex there, now I'm taking a look at my lighting here. This platoon of 30, 35, possibly 40 soldiers in the prone or behind cover. I mean, this entire platoon could be only on one half of the hex. So, of course, it gets into more detail, but the idea that you can't fire through your own units at all, period, regardless of type of unit or anything, is a little hard to accept. They're really hard to accept, but it's still a fun game. I'm playing it. I will continue to play it. It's just a vast oversimplification that I do accept. But I just want to point it out because I don't want anybody watching this to think that I'm not, completely aware of these things. And for that matter, the ranges involved here are really pretty wacky. Okay, so a platoon. This is supposed to be a platoon. Engaging, so it can engage with half of its direct fire combat factor at 2 hexes away. This would be 1.5 to a defense factor of 3. This is still only 1 to 2, which is still a 40% chance of pinning the target unit. It's not, when I say it's a little wacky, is that, no, actually that's not the right term. It's just a very coarse combat model, which I guess I understand that the rules are probably all designed really for armor first and infantry second. Now, I'm just guessing about that. And really, again, it's adding more detail, but really you need completely different combat systems for infantry, groups of infantry versus armored vehicles. But this is all the same combat system, ratio based. So anyways, back to my point, it's such a coarse system because you basically have normal range of 1. Remember, 250-meter hexes. So this is actually understandable that this is regular range, but it is adjacent. So, well, I guess I'll go the other way. I should go the other way. So as the Israelis approach, here they're at extreme range, but it's still 1 to 2, right? 1.5, yeah. Still 1 to 2 odds. 40% chance of pinning the Egyptian target unit. Then they advance one more. Now they're in regular range. Now it's 1-to-1. Now it's 40% chance of pinning plus add to that 10% chance of destroying it outright in what are supposed to be, I think, 15-minute turns. It's not, yeah, 15 minutes. I mean, not really. Yeah, in again, a very coarse. Here we're talking about a 10% chance of destroying it outright. Really means probably the Israelis killed maybe a squad worth of Egyptians, which rendered the Egyptian infantry platoon, combat ineffective in the scope of a scenario. Yes. And then if they move one more, they're at close range. Now it's 2-to-1. Now it's 30% chance of destroying it outright, plus another 40% chance of pinning it. Yeah, it's just not saying combat system is, it's actually probably as good as it's going to get within the basic confines of the model, meaning odds ratios, odds ratio, and basically a combat system that begins with light infantry having one direct fire combat factor, and then basically you go up from there. And the other coarseness of the system, of course, is that, I say of course because you should have already, if you don't know the game and you've watched earlier videos, you should have already seen that, fire on a tank, or I'm sorry, an armored fighting vehicle unit, which is supposed to be a platoon, average of 4 vehicles, some cases 3, sometimes 5 vehicles, something like that, but average of 4 vehicles, you have a result of damaged, which can only be a very, again, abstract concept for a armored fighting vehicle platoon. But in any case, in the game, in the model, it's damaged, it's half firepower, keeps its same defense factor, which I guess, again, within the confines of this model makes sense. Just basically just have the firepower and have the movement. You can debate whether the movement should be changed at all. But in any case, again, it's the coarseness of it's damaged, another damaged, and it's eliminated. Same with, of course, the non-vehicle units. They get a pin, and a second pin kills them. Just a very, very coarse system. Again, it works for what the game is trying to do, which I do think it is trying to be a fast-playing system where the general rules can be fairly easily memorized. And I guess I should comment on that. I like the rules. The rules, I guess. It's not the layout, but it's the concept behind the rules, the general rules, advanced rules, and optional rules. So you can fairly well memorize the general rules, and then you can look up the advanced rules and optional rules, including, this is, for example, fighter bombers, helicopters, obstacles and fortifications, cohesion, command control, expanded command control, I should say. You can look those up when you need them. I like that idea. Not that idea for how you put together your rules is superior to basically a complete but much more detailed, single rule system. I'm going to go ahead and pause and make sure that the lighting was decent enough, and then if it was, I hope to pick up again right away.